Hi everybody, it's Sarah Cray with Let's Make Art, and we do different watercolor projects every single week. That sounds like a lot. It's not. It's an hour a day, super fun, and we break it down into steps. So if you're just a beginner or you just want to try it or you're getting back into it, it's perfect for you. You will do great. This week we are painting our sea turtle. This is super fun. It seems like a lot, but there's just a lot of steps. So if you guys follow along with me, you will be great. I know it. So we are using two brushes, a round 6 and a round 2, our standard brushes, you might say.
What were their names?
Oh yes, we named them during the Octopus Live. Keith is our round 2.
Yes.
And Hank is our round 6.
That's right.
So, this is really great. I'm really glad you reminded me of that.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. The colors we are using, the very first color is we are using deep yellow. Second color, we are using tiger orange. And you kind of go like, rah. And they're very similar in color. Okay, I know some people are like, these look the same. This one has a slightly more orange hint to it. This one right here. But they are similar. So if yours are similar, don't stress out. That's how they are. It's okay. Because sometimes it's fun to mix colors that are different, which we do a lot in our subscription boxes, is we mix colors. But especially for the tropical sunset, you'll see that even the slightest shift in colors, sometimes it's easier to choose a color that's really similar next to it than to try and mix those colors in between. So there is a benefit to it. Next color we are using is Tahoe Blue. And then our very last color we are using is black. So those are our 4 colors. That's it, 4 colors for this entire sea turtle. Put that to the side. Now we have 5 steps for this turtle. And I know I said there's a lot of steps, but I guess what I mean is the steps are just a little bit longer, just a little bit more in depth, but that's okay. The very first step, we are going to start with doing the background or the water around our sea turtle. Step number 2, we're going to do the shell. Step number 3, we're going to do the shadows that are on the body, so like under the belly, on the fins, on the head, that kind of thing. Step number 4, we're going to do all these spots. Shoot, I should have looked it up.
Freckles. We'll call them freckles.
Why don't you Google the correct term? Did you see how many people commented about the palm leaves? They're called fronds. Like 10 people commented. They're called palm fronds. F-R-O-N-D-S.
I don't know if they're right.
I've heard that before actually, so I'm pretty sure they are.
Never heard that. So.
Anyways, we'll Google the correct term, but feel free to tell us. We love information. And then the very last step is just details. That's all it is. So we'll, finish off the eyeball, see if there's any other adjustments we need to make. But that's it.
Perfect.
Perfect. So I have my outline here, and you might be wondering, Sarah Cray, where do I get an outline? Well, if you order a kit from us, so a painting kit for this sea turtle is $15. Comes with the paint, paper, outline, step-by-step, all that good stuff. Or if you have our subscription box, it should be in there too. Or if you're just like, I'm in Australia and I can't buy the subscription box, well, guess what? We give you the outlines for free on our website.
That's incredible.
That's when you go like, dang.
Dang.
Thanks. So, if you just have your own materials, then still paint with us. You can just go to our website, find the sea turtle kit. There's a button there that says outline. Click on that little baby. You can print it off at home. Paint with us. Wherever you are, with whatever you're using.
That's the easiest and best method.
We just want you to paint. That's our goal. Okay. And then I use graphite paper to transfer. There's multiple ways of transferring images. If you need to know how to use graphite paper, watch a live. I do that. Google it. You can do that too. Okay, let's get started. Keaton, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so when we do our water, because I know that we like to add backgrounds to our subjects. I'm not a huge fan of backgrounds. That's why a lot of things I paint are just like sitting on a piece of paper. But there's a way with watercolor, the beautiful thing about it is you can have like a soft background where it's not even totally finished, but it still will give you that same feel of a complete painting. So we're gonna start with our background first. And I do get a lot of questions about backgrounds. Do you do them first or after? I prefer to do them first because as you paint things on top of each other, it will get layered, which is true to how you would see it. For example, I wouldn't, if I want the turtle to stick out from the water, so I would paint the water first, and then that way the brush marks will overlap on the water. However, with watercolor, it's sometimes tricky. It really just depends on what you're painting. So sometimes doing the background after is appropriate. I don't think it's a huge deal. So whatever you feel comfortable doing. But this time we're gonna do our background first. So, and I want it to be darker in color right underneath the turtle because I want to give the sense of the body has weight and is almost casting a shadow. And so that's where the color is going to be darker. So I'm going to pick up my Tahoe blue with my round 6. Make sure there's not too much water on your brush. Usually when you dip your brush in the water, you hit it off the side a few times to get rid of that excess water. I'm going to pick up a ton of paint here, and then I'm going to start laying the color down. So I'm going to do a few strokes here, and then I'm just going to do a couple swishes in my cup and start blending out. Now because we rinsed our brush, this new color that we're spreading out should be a lighter value. And I'm going to keep spreading that out. But remember to hit your brush off the side because you don't want it to start puddling on your paper. So you can see this is a much lighter wash going on over here compared to here, which is what I want. Also, since we're adding water to this that's already here, you're going to get some blooms and some texture lines in watercolor. Really embrace that aspect of watercolor. If you're new to it, sometimes it stresses you out, like you think you're doing something wrong. But for me, it's my favorite part about watercolor because that's what makes it yours. And there's an element of surprise and accidental art. And I think it just adds more visual interest, personally, to have like these different textures going on. So I'm just gonna keep kind of spreading this paint. And then when I get up in here between the fins, I'm gonna start again with that strong color. And try and avoid the fins if you can, since watercolor is transparent. You will see it, even if you paint the fins after. So, and to cover a lot of surface area with your brush, you're gonna wanna use the side of your brush. So I'm not filling in water using the tip of my brush doing this, because that would just take way too long. So what you do is you just use the side, the full side, and look how thick of a stroke I can get with that. And I'm gonna do some color over here. And this is where you can really have fun with it, because if you are a subscriber, if you've done other projects with us, you can do the wet on wet technique where you put the water down first and then drop in the color, and you can just let it move. Or you can just do what I was doing, which laying the paint and the water down simultaneously. But this is where you get to decide what you want to do. It's your painting. Make it however you want. And then I'm going to do another layer back here. Sometimes when you put color down and you blend it out, then you lose that kind of dark value that you wanted to keep. Not a big deal. You can just do another layer on top. Keenan, did you Google what those things are called?
I did. It's a very elusive information thing, and I can't tell if they have freckles. I'm just going to say they have freckles.
So you like Googled like what did you Google?
Do turtles have freckles?
No, you should Google what are the name of spots on turtles. Try that.
Do turtles actually eat pizza?
What? Oh, what is that called?
Teenage Mutant
Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Remember that snowstorm story I told you, where we got stuck in the blizzard?
Yeah.
We watched the second Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles at that house. I remember that entire moment of life.
I feel like I'll never forget that. Keenan's talking about in his youth when he was just a boy. His family was driving in a storm, and it was super snowy, and they got off the road and like snow was piling on their car, and they walked to the nearest house. There's like one house they could see, and they stayed there for the night. that people that they stayed at their house essentially saved their lives. And then they stayed family friends for a long time.
For several years.
For several years. Okay, now when I'm doing the water above the turtle, Keenan tells the story way better. Sorry, that was
That's
just
fine.
a quick summary.
It was good. It's fine, you know. Our car wasn't being buried by snow though. You made it sound like we got like really buried.
Well,
I just want to clarify, we just got really stuck.
yeah,
In a
but didn't
large
you say
drift.
that the drifts were coming
Yeah.
over on the car?
Yeah, I guess
So
that's
isn't that the same thing as being... Okay, now when I'm getting to the top of the turtle, I'm not really starting with the super strong dark paint that I am kind of over here. I'm using just a lighter wash. That just means I'm going to have more water than paint in my mixture. And remember, when the water and the color get together, they're going to have a mind of their own. They're going to want to do their own thing. Let them. Just let them let go. And just be like, what are you going to show me this week? Paint?
Paint?
Paint. Okay. And then what I liked to do to get more of that kind of underwater feel is I'm going to do some sea spots. Oh, I forgot to mention, you guys can see my palette in here. This color I'm not using. It's like a purple. It was just left over from the octopus, so I just worked around it. But I just want to show you guys that you don't have to rinse your palette every time you start a new project. You can just add colors different places and use that palette for a while, and these watercolors come back up. So even if this purple is dry right here, if I took a wet paintbrush and brought it right back up, I can paint with it just like it came out of the bottle. So that's what's going on over here. So if you see this color, don't worry about it. Okay, so I want to do some like water drips around. So I'm gonna, this is where you do want to load your brush up with water and kind of have it be dripping, and then you're just gonna like, you know, do this stabbing motion around the edge.
What was the word Drea came up with?
Oh, she came up with such a good word. I can't remember.
I can't even.
When we did the live for the jellyfish,
Yeah.
Drea, who is on with us, gave us a much happier word than stabbing.
Less killy.
Okay, you guys, that's step one. We did it. Good job. So you should have like kind of a soft background. And the other thing I want you to keep in mind with backgrounds is don't feel like you have to go to the edge of the painting every single time. You can if you want to. You don't have to. I like to have kind of rough edges where it doesn't feel complete. That's my personal preference. Feel free to have your own. Okay, so we're going to move on to step two. We are going to do the shell. So for the shell, we're basically using the orange and the yellow and a little bit of black in there to get a brown color. Because brown is essentially dark orange. Did you know that, Keenan?
I did not know that.
Brown is dark orange. So
What? Who decided that?
I think it's just what it is.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. So I'm going to start with taking a bit of my tiger orange and grabbing a little bit of black and mixing that together. I'm going to get this brownish kind of gold color. Now when I do these parts on the shell, I'm going to want the bottom of them to be darker and the top of them to be lighter. Now as you can see in my example, it's not a smooth transition. There are darker spots throughout here. And that's okay. If you've seen the shell of a turtle, it's not like a super smooth transition in color. There are different markings and spots on them. So one, that gives us freedom to play, right? Because not one sea turtle shell is the same as the next. I didn't look that up, but I feel like that's safe to say.
Pretty sure that's safe to say.
So if you have a weird mark somewhere in here, that's okay. Don't stress about it. It's not a big deal. Don't get mad. Okay, so I'm gonna just start. You kind of want to make sure that it's not super wet wherever you're laying your hand, because you will pick up color and then you will get it all over your painting. Happens to me all the time. So I just kind of test it to make sure. And then I'm going to start by putting in this kind of brown color at the bottom. And then I'm just going to use water to spread it out. And then while it's still wet, I'm going to drop in even darker color here. So I'm just going to go similar to our wet and wet technique with the jellyfish. Just gonna drop that there. Now, if this is too spotty for you, where you're just like, that just looks like tie-dye or polka dots, you can blend some of it out so it's not super obvious that you went plop, plop, plop. So I like to blend it out, and then, because I love color, I love to do a drop of pure yellow, deep yellow, kind of near the top, and help spread that out there. And that just adds a richness to it. And you can decide how dark you want the bottom to be. Okay, so that's one piece of our shell. So we're just gonna repeat that process on all of the sections. Keenan, did you Google what those spots are called?
I did. They're literally called markings.
Just markings.
As far as I can find in my quick cell phone research.
While you're also trying to film this.
Which is fine. I should be able to multitask. I'm no octopus or octopus.
Nobody is like octopodes,
No.
as
Or,
we've learned.
As Campbell Candiff said, octopodes.
Octopodes?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a real word?
Yes. He did some extensive research on the name.
What does that mean?
I think it's plural for octopus. It's octopodes.
Or is it characteristics of an octopus?
Oh, questions? questions.
Keenan's like, you have so many questions. Now, and you can drop in orange if you want to try dropping in the orange instead of the yellow. You can do both. But I just, for me, because you mix the color to get the color, and then when you drop in the pure color itself, I feel like it just gives that extra punch of like color. That sounded really repetitive, but
It's okay.
you know what I'm saying.
We all like punch and color.
We do. Okay, I did get a little yellow marking down here, but that's okay because I'm going to cover that up anyway. In the meantime, I'm just going to blend it out so it doesn't stay a hard line, but it's not a big deal. Okay, let's keep on keeping on, you guys.
It would just be the greatest if somebody could combine all of February's projects into one piece of paper.
I think some people have done it.
Because that would be the coolest, like, I mean, obviously they tie together very well for a beach theme.
Yes.
We all want to be at a beach right now.
Yes, we do.
So I think it would just be a great picture.
I think so too. I think somebody was trying it. I've definitely seen, because we did those small challenges. Actually, I don't know if you know this, but in our Facebook group, we're doing like small step-by-step challenges, and one of them was a mermaid tail, and somebody did like a mermaid tail with jellyfish and the sea turtle under the water, which was pretty cool.
That's neat.
Now, something else you kind of want to keep in mind is if your water is wet and you touch your brown orange color to the blue, it's going to bleed out and spread. So something that I sometimes do to just avoid that from happening is I'll leave a super thin white line in between those two spaces, and then that way I know for sure that it won't bleed out. However, if it does bleed out, don't get mad about it. It's just doing its thing. You can either pick it up with paper towel or you can just like let it go. Sometimes the bleed out textures that you get are really cool and you're just like, I'm gonna leave that.
That one looks really cool.
Yeah, it's looking good. Now when we get to the top parts and these smaller ones, it's a little bit harder to do such a strong transition of a dark bottom to a light top. So if you have trouble with it, that's okay. Not a big deal. I'm just gonna drop in some color here. Now, I just wanna show you guys a trick. Sometimes you put down paint and water like this, and it's like almost a pool, like there's a lot on there. When that happens, you can actually use your paintbrush to pick up extra. So you just kind of dry off your brush, and I'm just going to let my brush soak up the excess and kind of like swipe up. Dry it off, swipe. So if you notice that there's pools on your paper or you're like, this area is too wet, I can't do anything with it, just take a mostly dry brush, have it absorb that excess, wipe it off, and keep on doing that till there's like nothing there pretty much. So use your brush as a tool to lift up paint and water as well.
Pro tip.
Pro tip, you can use it that way. Okay, and then I'll do this one at the top. Now, if you can, try and leave the lines in between these sections of the shell super, super thin. If you leave them too wide, then the white part on that shell will become distracting. So you kind of want to, like, even if you have to go outside of the outline that I provided, which is okay, it's just a guideline, do it. And try and have them fairly close together. That is looking so good. Good job, you guys. I'm sure yours looks great.
It looks awesome.
Okay, now I'm gonna do these like smaller shells here. And if you can work quickly, sometimes what I do is I'll do a few at a time where I color them in. And then while they're still wet, I drop in that kind of the dark or the light, the extra color in there. If you paint a little bit slower, which is okay, there's nothing wrong with that, then you're gonna wanna just do one at a time. Because if you try and drop in color after something dries, it won't spread out. And remember, they're gonna spread, do their own thing, get kind of funky, and you just go with it. And then these ones here at the end get a little curvy. And I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna kind of thin out some of, or like thicken some of these to thin out the white lines. Does that make sense? Keenan?
Yes, it does. Sorry, to defend myself on the delayed answer, you mentioned earlier that if you have too thick of white lines, that it will be distracting. So it makes sense that you're going to make those thicker to get rid of the white lines.
Yes.
Just in defense of Keenan. Every time I edit these videos and I listen to myself, I don't sound as excited as I feel when I mention the colors.
You're listening to this, you're like, man, I sound like I'm hating.
I hate my life.
You know what? Hearing yourself talk is a trip.
It really
is. It's a hard thing to get used to.
The only time I enjoy it is when I manipulate my voice to how I want it to sound.
Yeah.
My normal voice is just like,
No, and then you hear yourself laugh, and then like you're just like, oh my gosh.
People should subject it to that sound.
Like people hear that laugh all the time.
I laugh so much.
Okay, so our shell is looking really awesome. We're gonna do one more step on this before we move on to step 3, which you see we have like a section right here and then one right here. And I know that seems a little bit confusing, but essentially the idea of that is at one point we're gonna have a highlight on the edge of our shell, because on the very edge of a shell it's thick and it's usually a lighter color, and we want to be able to differentiate between the stomach and the shell. So this thick line on the bottom here is kind of acting as that highlight. So what I'm going to do is, and this is something I like to do in watercolor, is just sometimes take color that's already there. So I'm just gonna like take some of this and kind of blend at that first line, the top part, as if the shell is like continuing on to the edge. And that's a little too light yellow for me, so I'm gonna introduce some more brown into there. And it's gonna kind of keep going this way. But as it gets to the top part, you wanna leave it kind of light because we want there to be a little bit of an, of an edge on that. Okay, so it's just like a soft blend here where I still wanna keep the shape of most of these bottom parts of the shell. And then this section right here, I'm gonna leave mostly white, or maybe even do a really light wash on top of it if it's too bright, but we wanna make sure it has an edge to that shell. So that's step 2. You guys are doing awesome. Now we are going to move on to step 3, which is the shadows. And this is kind of important because with sea turtles, they have these markings here. But you can, if we didn't put shadows on the fins themselves or the head or this, are they called fins?
Excellent question.
Google that.
I will Google that.
Arms or feet? We'll tell you.
If I didn't sound excited about that question, I apologize.
He's really excited to get you guys the answer. So if we want to communicate that this is actually a form, it still has to have shadow on it even though there's markings on top. A lot of the times you just do the markings and you don't really pay attention to the color of what's happening on the arm underneath the markings. If you ignore that, then your leg or arm or whatever fin is going to feel flat. So you have to pay attention to how the color changes underneath the markings as well as on the markings themselves. We're not doing the markings yet, so we're not going to talk about that just yet. We're going to do our shadows. So I'm going to start with, let's start with this first arm fin over here. Now, pretty much what I'm going to do is use a similar color to what we did for the shell, but just a little bit more black in it. Now that's going to give it a slight green color, a hint of a green. It's going to be like a green gray. That's okay. And honestly, when I was looking at reference photos for sea turtles, a lot of the shadowing colors had a green tint to it because they're in the water. And so when you have like yellow and cream turtles in blue water, then you mix yellow/cream and blue together, you get green. So it's okay if your shadows have a green tint. Don't stress out. So I'm just going to, I have a mark on my first fin of where that shadow is. And remember, we want to blend these things out. So I put my color in and then I'm going to rinse my brush and just use water to blend some of this out. Now, whenever you're doing shadows of something that's coming out, you want the part where it's coming out of to be the darkest, and then the shadow will gradually get lighter across the entire thing. So I'm probably going to do one more, I'm going to do one more run of shadow right where it's coming out from the other side of the body. Any luck, Keenan?
Well,
what if you just Google parts of a sea turtle?
I tried that and it got real deep into some, I got really confused.
Okay.
So this says, while most turtles have webbed feet, and I think this is
Okay.
talking about the lower part of the body, but it says,
Yeah.
while most turtles have webbed feet, some, such as the pig-nosed turtle, have true flippers, with the digits being fused into paddles and the claws being relatively small. These species swim the same way as sea turtles do. Sea turtles are almost entirely aquatic and have flippers instead of feet.
Flippers. That's the word we're looking for. Flippers. Good job, Keenan.
But I think
No, don't overthink it. What?
that's the end. Those are the end ones, not the arm ones. I think
Well, somebody will tell us if we're
Someone's
wrong.
gonna tell
I'm
us.
going to call them flippers, okay?
I like flippers.
Let me know if I'm wrong. I'm also going to add a little extra shadow on the very end of the flipper. Bam, set it.
It could be arms.
Okay, I got my blue in there. I got some blue water in there. Don't stress, you guys. Don't freak out. I'm going to take a damp brush and I'm going to try and pick up that excess blue. So I'm just swooping up, wiping, swooping up, wiping. And then bam, it's like essentially gone, okay? It's not a big deal. Okay, we're gonna keep on keeping on. So I did my my front flipper, excuse me, the farthest flipper. Now the shell itself is gonna cast a shadow on the body, right? So, because it's one form on top of another, and if anything has dimension, there's gonna be shadow and value. So kind of I have it kind of outlined right here, kind of where the arm is coming out from underneath the shell. The flipper is coming out from underneath the shell. It's shadowed there. Now I'm going to leave a really thin white line to compensate for the edge of the shell. So there's the beginning of my shadow, and then I'm just going to take water and blend that out. Because even though we're using an outline, we don't want it to feel like a coloring book where it's blocky. Usually we have smooth transitions when we're talking about light and shadow. So we just want to make it feel nice and smooth. So I'm just going to keep blending this out a little bit. And then I'm going to do similar with our other flipper. I'm going to do a little shadow on the end. And that's because we want to give the illusion that this flipper kind of has a roundness to it, right? Because like when it's in the water, it's usually curved. Similar, like think of these as flippers.
Okay, I'm thinking of them as flippers.
Are you convinced? Can you just actually put
Flippers
right here? When I ask you to do that, is that so much more work?
Not really. I just don't know how to do that yet.
Well,
I will sure try.
Flippers.
Just, yeah, perfect.
So we want it to be clear that they're actually kind of round. And so when things are round, they start back, they come out, and then they go back in. So they're starting back, coming out with that highlight, and then the back, to show that it's kind of going away from us a little bit, is we shadow that part. And that will make it recede. Okay, now we are going to move on to the belly. So when you do the belly, the underneath part of the belly is shadowed for that same reason. It is a body that is rounded. So this part is going to be highlighted, and then as the body turns away from us, it's going to be shadowed. That's how we can tell that it's round. The other thing is the arm itself is on top of the stomach. It's coming out, so the arm is also going to cast a shadow on the belly. So we're looking at two different kind of shadow points here. We have one here underneath the arm, and then on the belly. So you're going to kind of have like a curve instead of just like one side. So I'm starting that shadow, and then I'm going to just use water to spread it out to have a smooth transition. And I actually am going to put in a little bit of green in there. And sometimes when you're dropping in strong color like this, you think like that doesn't belong there, but it's color on things is super interesting. There's so much more color and variations of color within one thing than our brain can notice. So I'll never forget, I remember, I think I was in 6th grade, and my 6th grade teacher really loved art, and so he would do many art lessons when we had extra time. And he said, if you look at the trunk of a tree, or if you look at the wood of a tree, it's not just brown. There's like yellow browns and green browns and purple browns and red browns. And it's when you start to notice the variations, like the second color within a color. Sorry, I just hit my mic. When you notice the second color in a color, that's when you're just like, I know that green on the bottom of a belly sounds weird, but it's there. And that's actually why painting human skin is really difficult, because there are lots of secondary colors within our skin tones. Also, sea turtles sometimes have those markings on the belly, so I'm just gonna do a couple here and there. I don't want anything too distracting, but just to give it a little bit of that kind of texture. Okay, the shell, we're going to do the back flipper. The shell itself is casting a shadow on that back flipper because it's sitting right on top of it. So we're going to do our shadow, and then blend out. Now, these back flippers aren't as long and don't curve as much as the front ones. So we're not as concerned as making sure there's a shadow on that back part of the flipper, because it's shorter, it's not curving away from us the same way the front flippers are. Okay. And then we got to do underneath the head. I have a little line there kind of showing you where that shadow goes. I'm going to do this bottom shadow. I'm going to introduce a little bit of green in there. And if you want to even do so I'm going to blend this out. And then what I'm going to do is just the softest hint of blue underneath in that shadow also. And then coming out from the neck. We're going to do that, and then we're going to softly blend it out. Now we want to leave the space in between these markings on the nose. For the most part, we want to try and leave that white. So I'm gonna try and end my blending out kind of near the eyeball. Okay, I think we're good. I'm gonna adjust the shadow on this a little bit. It kind of blended out weird. Hey Keenan.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know when Al filmed these tutorials,
Yeah.
my left hand would always get in the way? You can tell me to move it, but he used to give me pens that I would have to hold on to underneath the table, so I would stop from keeping my hand and blocking the camera.
What a good idea.
Yeah, so if I'm doing that, you can just tell me.
No, you haven't been, it's mostly your hair on the table.
I'm just like,
tell you where to move your hair.
I paint like
Yeah.
this.
Put a camera on your shoulder.
Yeah, just like perched right there.
It'd be kind of cool.
Okay, and I'm actually gonna darken the shadow underneath. And the strengths of shadows are important too. And so what I've noticed is like, if the shell is really close to the thing it's on top of, for example, this flipper, it's gonna have a stronger shadow, which means it's gonna be darker from where it starts, and then it will blend out. When something is farther away, so let's say, like if this is the flipper and my shell is right here, I'm gonna have a really strong shadow. If it's like up here, it's gonna be a softer shadow. And you can do the same thing with like, if you have a light right here and you're taking like your hand, like when you do those hand things, what are those called?
Hand shadows?
Hand shadows. Sure. If your hand,
Specific name for them.
when things are closer, the shadows are sharper. If you put your light back here and your hand's super far away from it, it might not cast this strongest shadow.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
But
So
I
it's,
do that a lot with my kids, where it's like a light.
yes,
So
they love it.
It's a broken thing.
So it's the same thing. This shell is closer to this flipper than like this, so it's gonna have a more intense shadow. All right, hi everybody. We are painting step 4, which is the markings on the turtle. Guess what? I'm wearing a different outfit now. And that's because it's a different day. And that's because when we were filming the sea turtle, a huge storm hit Missouri and we needed to get out.
Vacate.
We needed to vacate the premises so we could be safely at home while the snow piled up around us. Just one of the many joys of living in the Midwest that I have discovered. Anyways, so we're gonna move on to step 4. We're gonna do the markings on the fins. Now, you may have noticed that I taped down the right side of that my paper. And that is because when this was wet and I just walked away from it, it started to bend, which as it dries, your paper is gonna kind of bend and warp if you have a lot of water on it. Now, usually when your painting is done, that's not a big deal because you can put it in a folder or a frame and it will flatten it out and no problem. But if you still wanna work on it, then you gotta flatten it out. Also, this kind of worked out because it's great for you guys to see that you can leave a painting in the middle of it and come back to it a couple of days later, and it's totally fine. It's not a big deal at all. So it worked out. Snowstorm is helping us learn, right? Yeah.
So many things. Don't drive a rear wheel vehicle.
Listen, when you live in Missouri, rear wheel vehicles,
Horrible.
don't get them. Keenan's lived here like almost all of his life, I
It was
feel.
a purchase of my 2 years ago youth.
2 years ago? That's how long you've had that car? It's just 2 years?
Is that normal?
I don't know. I feel like, because you're like, it's a Mustang. I never would get this opportunity. I just imagined you being like 17.
It's not a Mustang.
Oh, Mercedes.
Mercedes.
Mercedes, sorry.
Yeah. No, I bought it 2 years ago. So, like, this thing's sweet.
You know what? We all have dreams.
I never dreamt of driving a Mercedes.
Then why would you
until
buy-
2 years ago? When I
Why
saw
would
this
you
car.
buy that car? Listen, all I know is when there's even the hint of a little bit of snow, Keenan goes, crap, I'm not going to be able to drive home.
We got half an inch.
And I'm like,
not
you
gonna get out of
live
the
in
yard.
Missouri. You need a hardier vehicle. All right, sorry, you guys. Moving on. So we're working on the markings on our fins, but really quick, before we do that, I just want to show you something that you can do. So after coming back to this painting after a few days, I was able to kind of like look at it and be like, how is this different from my reference photo? And are there any changes I can make? The first thing I noticed is the shell. I feel like the top of the shell in our reference photo is a lighter value, and here it's still pretty dark. So I just want to show you that it's possible to lift out color. So to do that, I'm just going to take a brush, get it damp. I'm not picking up any paint, and I'm just going to get the area wet that I want to lighten. So I'm getting that wet. And then you can either take your paper towel. So one way is to just take your paper towel and kind of blot it. And if you do that, that's great. We kind of have a hard line here. That's okay, you just blend that out. Try and make that transition smooth. Or another thing you can do is just use your paintbrush itself to lift out color. So I'm just taking my paintbrush, I'm swooping it across where I want to lift out color, wiping it on my paper towel. Swoop. You just have to be careful because in this method sometimes you get too much water. So whenever you pick up water, hit your paintbrush off the side of your cup a couple of times so there's not too much. And then use your paper towel a lot to kind of like pick up the excess water or to wipe up off what you don't need. Bam. Let's do one more. So I'll do this one too. So with watercolor, you can't totally erase something, and you also can't just paint over something because watercolor is transparent. However, there's little things that you can do. You totally can lighten a color just by adding some water and then picking that color up while it's wet. There we go. And because we did that, my turtle now has a little bit more dimension on that shell because that high or lighter value is there. All right, moving on to our markings. So I'm going to switch to my round 2, and I'm going to mix like a really dark brown. And again, these palettes and paints, you can reuse them even after they've dried. So they're dry, but I can just add some water to them and bring them right back up. So to mix like a dark brown, you either want to mix complementary colors or you just like add black and orange together. Complementary colors, if you don't know, we have a little video about color theory on our YouTube channel, and you can watch that and I tell you all about complementary colors.
Very useful.
Very useful. So you can refer back to that if you're like, I don't really know what those are. That's okay. All right. So I got my dark brown here. Now because we are mixing brown and orange or yellow, it's gonna have kind of a green tint to it. Don't let that freak you out. It's okay. It's not a big deal. If it's bothering you so much and you can't handle how green it is, and if you happen to have pink or red nearby, put a tiny bit of that color in there. It will neutralize that green because they're complementary colors. Okay, moving on. We're gonna start. Let's start at the bottom here. It doesn't really matter if you start at the bottom of the top, but basically they're just going to be kind of like puzzle pieces that fit together. So they're going to be mostly square in shape, but some of them can get a little funky. So I just kind of start. And I didn't outline these. What is that?
Dump truck?
Dump truck? Oh, it is trash day. Maybe
That's
they're.
not a trash truck.
Maybe that's what they're getting. Garbage man. So we're adding our markings. Oh, I got a flyaway part. Stay in there, little guy. Okay. Now you just want to leave like a little thin line in between all of these. If you leave too much white space in between them, it's gonna look a little funky. So when you're adding these little funky marks, leave little space. Like I said, if you leave up thick lines, it's gonna look weird. It's kind of like mosaic. You know those like mosaic stepping stools or tiles? Yeah. That's pretty much kind of what we're making here. We're just little pieces fit together. Now, I didn't outline every single one of these pieces on the outline because it's like unnecessary, I feel. Because I feel like all the markings on turtles would be different anyway. And also, who wants to take the time to outline every single one of these little things? Especially when it's not like imperative to the project. You know what I'm saying?
I do actually. It also
Hopefully you
would
guys
limit-
agree with me.
It would limit their creativity because, like you said, every
Yeah.
turtle's shapes, things are going to be different.
It's all different. I mean, when there are moments where you can make something your own, do it. Step outside your comfort zone and be like, no, this shape is going to go here. The only bad thing about this, so time consuming. We're like a third done with one flipper, but that's okay. It's kind of therapeutic.
At what point in painting does your hand not cramp up?
I fortunately have only had my hand, so one time I did like 8 paintings in a day. I think I did like projects, and then I had some commissioned pet portraits, and like somebody had my girls for the day, so I was just like, I'm gonna freaking just bust out all this work. But the next day my hand was so cramped and sore. So during, I didn't notice, but the next day, I couldn't paint. Made me really sad. Because then I'm just like, I'm just getting older.
Was it circa 25 years old?
I was 28.
So last year.
Last year, yep. Now you want to keep these little markings things. I like started them a little bit bigger, and then as I make my way up, they're going to get a little bit smaller, but just like slightly smaller, not like freckles, which is what Keenan tried to call these.
They could be freckles.
You're right, they could
It
be.
might be an Irish turtle. You don't know.
I don't know enough about sea turtles to be saying this so confidently. And honestly, when I was thinking about teaching this sea turtle project and like the length of time, I knew this one was going to take longer, but only because of these marks. They do take a long time. So if you see I guess this is a moot point, because I was going to say, if you see the time on the video, don't let that intimidate you, because it's just these markings. And then I realized if they've made it this far into the video,
Yes, that's true too.
then
I'm
they probably
gonna
already
leave-
decided to paint it.
I'm probably going to leave that in there.
Okay, let's like play a game and see how fast I can paint these. Okay?
Okay, go.
Oh yeah, I'm booking. I'm also leaving a thin white edge on the right side of the flipper. Excuse me. Do you know what would be kind of fun? If we did these like challenges on like our Facebook or Instagram group, where we give people like a project, like the poppies or whatever, octopus, and we're like, paint this in 5 minutes and just see what people paint. I think it would be fun.
I'd get a stick man out of it, and I wouldn't even be able to get the eyeball circled.
Okay, Keenan, this is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna have you do the 5-minute project because I can guarantee you're not gonna get a stick man out of a project. Never once have we painted a stick man.
That's how bad it would be. That's what I'm trying to say.
I actually love to say to people when they, like when they've come into the store, or I tell them what I do, and I'm like, yeah, and it could be for anybody that you can learn, and they just say, I can't even draw a stick man. And I say, that's perfect, because we never draw stick mans. And then they laugh, and they're like, oh, ha, 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 you found a way around my little
joke.
joke.
You out-joked my joke.
You out-joked my joke. Or sometimes they roll their eyes and walk away, but that's okay too. Just kidding, nobody does that. Keenan, have you been timing me? That's okay.
I'm at about 48 seconds.
Okay, so I did my markings, but I'm looking at my flipper and I'm looking at the reference photo, and there is definitely more white space than that one, which if that happens to you, it's not a big deal, because you just go in and you just make your markings bigger to fill in that space. So that's what I'm going to do now.
Probably a better scenario to have more white space than glass.
Too little.
Too little.
That's true. Unless you have bleed proof white from Dr. P.H. Martin, which they come in little bottles. And if you guys don't have that, I would highly suggest, we sell them at letsmakeart.com. But they're perfect because they're like a white watercolor, but they're a little bit more opaque, but they're perfect for adding highlights or just doing like finishing touches, or I don't know, I love mine. So look that up. Can we include links in our video? Could I be like, this link I'm holding, click on it? Is that a thing?
I don't know. I would assume there's a way to do that.
Click on this link if you want to see this product.
That can actually be put in on YouTube, I think.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right.
I don't do that part though.
Oh, well, never mind, you guys. That's a good thought.
So we can figure it out.
Okay. So that is looking better already. Yes. Okay, we did one flipper. Now we have more to do. So we can do this one. Now this one, since we're seeing the back of it, since it's on the other side of the body, it doesn't have the markings on the outside of the fin. So we really only have to put the markings kind of around the top and the bottom where that fin is turning. So you would see a little hint of them, but not the entire thing. So just like up here a little bit. Oh, I lost my white spaces. That's okay, not mad about it. Okay, and then I'm gonna do some kind of on this bottom part. And I always love to blend things out. Unless I'm doing like super tight details like eyes, where I say don't let this blend out, but like these kind of markings where it's just like you're getting the hint of them, I just like to just kind of soften those markings a little bit so it doesn't, I don't know, I just don't want it to feel like you're sticking on something on top. You want it to be smooth transitions. So I like to like put down something and then I'll blend it out. And if you blend it out too much, it's not a big deal, then just make another mark. Okay, now we just have the rear flipper and then we'll do the markings on the head. So rear flipper, same thing. We're just gonna do this kind of mosaic mark making. Now because the flipper itself is smaller, I'm gonna have smaller markings than on the arm or the front flipper. But because we put our shadow down first, do you see how nice that looks? To be able to have the marks on the shadow and then when it's just white, it's just such a natural looking thing. And it's great to put the shadows on first because if I try to put the shadows on after I made these marks, then I would lose a lot of my markings there. So,
Cool.
Good job, you guys. I just feel like that flipper looks really dimensional. Okay, now we're gonna do the head ones. So these ones I did kind of outline a little bit more. And of course, it's your painting. You can totally add more to yours if you want, or different sizes. It's up to you. Now on these ones in the front, I want there to be a transition in value. So I did a darker top, and then I'm just using water to spread out this color so it's a little bit lighter. And then the same thing with the ones on the top part. The bottom is dark, and I'm lightening up as I go up. And that's because I just want it to be clear that this face is dimensional. So even the markings themselves, the light is hitting the markings themselves differently, which is going to create different values, and that's how we get form. Okay, and then this eyeball, there's actually a brown, I didn't outline it, but there's like a brown mark around the eyeball itself. So I'm just gonna go in. Now, whenever you are working with eyelids, what you want to do is, and you can look on your own eyelid, you just have to look closely. There's a value change on your eyelid, and that is because even your eyelid itself is dimensional, because your eyeball is underneath your eyelid and is protruding out of your face. So it's going to be shadowed here where it goes in, and then as it goes up over your eyelid, there it's going to be a lighter value right here, because your eyeball is literally like sticking out underneath your skin. So the light is hitting it different, and then like the edges are dark because that's where it's sinking in. Does that make sense?
It does.
So when you're doing, it's the same thing when you're doing the eyelid for the turtle, the edges are going to be dark, and then you're just going to want to take a damp brush and kind of move it over the top. So like the center part is going to be the lightest value, and then it transitions to a darker edge. And then that's just how, it's just going to help your turtle eye seem dimensional, like it's protruding out of the face instead of like stuck like a sticker right on top of the head of the turtle. And then he has little markings on the eyelid too, but that's wet, so I'm going to wait to do that. He's got a little nose. Okay. I'm feeling good about the markings. Now, one little thing that I'm going to adjust. I know that we talked about the shadow on this front flipper, how there's one at the top and then there's one at the bottom because it's going away from us. Now, I did put a shadow underneath on this fin, but I feel like it's still pretty light. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to softly kind of smear these markings on the bottom, because we just want to make it clear it's turning away from us. And so if we leave, so we have to think of like the white spaces in between the markings and how the value of that would change. So at the top I feel pretty good about this value change. Here I feel pretty good. Maybe I'll like blend some of this out just a little. But this bottom one, that white part was just too bright. But you also want it to be kind of like a smooth transition. We don't want like a hard line right here of where it's like messy and then it gets white. So I'm just gonna softly, like even more delicately blend out a couple of things so it's more of a, like a whoosh instead of a huh. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, yeah. And then I'm gonna darken this part here. Okay, that looks good. I'll darken right there. Yes. Okay, you guys, that was step 4, and that was probably the one that takes the longest, is doing all those marks. You guys did awesome. Very last step, we're gonna do our details. And details, not only does it include the fine little points that you want to stay nice and sharp, but it also includes taking a step back from your painting, looking at it and seeing if there's any adjustments you need to make anywhere else for it to just be better. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the mouth. So I'm just using my round 2 and a little bit of black, and I'm just going to follow just really thin black line like that. There is like, so this is an eyeball, this is an eyeball sticking out on the other side, but since it's turning away from us, we don't really see it. But I'm just gonna give the hint that it's there, so just a little black mark on that other side. And then I'm just looking at everything else before I do the eyeball. I do kind of want to darken some of these a little bit. So I'm going to put black in, or like a super dark brown, and blend those out. I'm gonna blend up here a little bit. Down here, I think I can go a little bit darker with those marks. Now these adjustments you might not be doing on your own painting, and that is okay. This is where it really is about yours and where yours is at. So don't follow everything I'm doing at this point if it doesn't make sense for your painting, because maybe you didn't need to add those shadows and your darks are already marked. Your darks are already marked. Your marks are already dark. Ooh. Okay. I feel good about that. Now I'm going to do the eyeball. Now the eyeball is just going to be black with a white little dot in the middle. And so I have my little dot outlined. I'm taking my black. I'm not talking because I'm focusing. Okay, now that looks really good. Now what I'm going to do to kind of soften, because this is a glare. This is the glare on the eyeball because the eyeball is wet. But sometimes when you do glares, they're super pronounced and you want to leave them like white, paper white, or you want to soften them up because that white dot can be distracting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let that dry, and then I'm just going to take one swoop with my paintbrush to do a super light gray value over that white dot, and that way it doesn't feel like a little, it's distracting. You know what I mean? You want it to be soft.
Less of a wee beady eye.
Yes. So I'm going to do my little markings on the eyelid. Kind of just mess with the face. Little nose. I just want a warmer color on the face. I don't know. So I'm going to take my tiger orange. I'm just going to softly like do a light just wash on the head of my turtle. Not the entire thing, probably like at the nose, a little bit at the top and near the neck. And that's just going to kind of warm up my turtle for me so it doesn't seem so like white cold. Does that make sense? I don't know. But this is your painting, so if you don't want to do that, don't do it.
I was actually going to ask you about the face.
Yeah?
Because it was a little cool.
We're going to be like, I'm sorry, sir, can you make that face like
Have you
better?
drawn a turtle before?
Have you actually seen a turtle? And then I'm going to bring this shadow that I already painted, I'm going to bring that to the mouth. Because it just feels right to me, you know? Feels right to do that. Yes. Okay, I feel like my eye is dry enough. I'm just going to take a little, and that's it. That's all. It's just a quick, with the damp brush, swoosh. If you work it back and forth too much, you're going to lose that white spot totally, and you'll have to go back in with like bleed proof white or acrylic paint or a white pen and put that eye back in there. That's it, you guys. That's our turtle. It looks really awesome. Actually, I want to add more dots around the eye. Hold on, really quick, you guys, just little. Yes, okay. So when you are untaping your painting, you're going to pull away from your paper to reduce the ripping. And that's it. This is our turtle. It looks so awesome. You guys did great. I can't wait to see what your turtles look like. I have seen some of you, if you order our subscription box, you get all the kits at once. And so this tutorial hasn't been released, but some people painted it just off the directions that are in the box and the kit that's in there, and they look so good. And so I can't wait to see what you guys do with this tutorial. If you paint it, share it. I know it sounds scary, but you guys can do it. Put yourself out there. People really respond to it. And then when you give yourself permission to be courageous and vulnerable, it gives other people permission to do it also. So put yourself out there and just do it. And if you don't feel safe doing it in your own social feeds, you can join our group, Safe Space, called Let's Make Art Together. It's on Facebook. Really supportive community. It is really large. Just to give you a heads up, there's like 9,000 people. Very active, but really great. So go ahead and join that. If you post it on Instagram, you can tag us in it, Let's Go Make Art, or use the hashtag Let's Make Art. Those are two different things, and I'm sorry about that, but that's just how it is. Okay, I think that's it, right?
That's it.
You guys are awesome. Bye.